Shalom, 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 shalom. As always, I want to give all the praises. Chal, halal, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kodash. Yahweh is the Most High's name, which means He is. Yahweh Shai is the Son's name, which means He's the deliverer. As always, double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, who are leading this world in truth and in spirit and sincerity. And salutations to my fellow Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters that have been edified by the truth of the scriptures of who we are, the true children of Israel, and who the other nations are. So, before we go into this video, I just want to play a quick disclaimer. There you go. So, the man on the screen here is a doctor of philosophy. He's a doctor of philosophy. His name is Abraham, Henry Abraham, right? So it's a doctor of philosophy. This is who this man is here. He is a doctor of philosophy of history, University of Toronto, 1965. He's the dean of the London College of Arts and Science and educator, author and lecturer, right? He's a dean of the College of Arts and Science in New York. He's a dean of academic affairs and student services in Toros College in Miami. He's also notable for his teachings on Jewish history and Judaism as a religion. So this is the man that we're going to discuss today, and we're going to review his video that he put up recently, all right, regarding the Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, so this is the man here. He's a well-read man. Now, before I even start, there is a scripture that is it Psalms 94 that comes to mind, right? Before I even start, I think it's Psalms 54. Hold on, family. Psalm 54. Psalm 64. All right. So this is the man we're going to discuss. So we can close him up now. That's who he is. This is the video. No. There is it. Is it here? So let's just bring this right to the end so we don't get this confused. Everything else. And before we start, just going to quickly bring out a Psalms before we go into this, right? You should enjoy this one, because when I say the heat is on, the heat is on. Backs against the wall, backs against the wall. Have they thrown in the towel? You tell me. Psalm 64, verse 8. And we're going to start here. So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Well, praises to Yahweh Bashim Yahushua Bashim Rakah Kodash. Without further ado, we're going to go straight into the video. All right, we're going to start here on the 3-minute mark.
Get us from it. And this has been a really tough last couple of weeks, I have to say. There's been a lot of news about the Jews in the, in the internet and public discourse, and not always in a positive way. In fact, I noted that yesterday the phrase "the Jews" was actually the top trending item on Twitter, and that just can't be a good thing.
It's been a tough couple of weeks because this word has gone global, like the Lord said. This word has to go to the four corners of the world, then shall the end come. And that's why it's been a tough couple of weeks for these so-called Jews. So they're on the defense, their backs against the wall. Have they thrown in the towel? Well, we're going to find out by the time we get to the end of this video. But you're going to see, you're going to understand that you're going to hear some confessions that it's going to distress their own people, the things that this man is going to say.
A lot of it has to do, of course, with the topic that we're discussing today, and how various celebrities and figures have made some news out of that. Our original topic, which we discussed many, many months ago, Rabbi Posey and I, was we were going to look at the topic was Jews of exotic communities, and that was kind of like an innocent title, so that thinking that we'd go to different parts of the globe and
sounded a bit more like a racist title, but they had to change it. So they called it "How Did Ashkenazim Become White Eligible?" Right? So anyway,
look at communities that were perhaps less Ashkenormative, meaning like less conforming to the expectations and standards of Ashkenazic society, which happens to be for the last 200 years or so the dominant Jewish community, but by no means.
As we know, the Ashkenazim community is not the dominant Israelite community. They're just the ones that the public believe are the Jews of the Bible. Whereas now this is all being unraveled. This is why these men here are trying to out the flames, out the fire, because just like the Lord said, right, that the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, right? Matthew 24 and 24. He said the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world. You see, these guys know that their time is up. So this is damage. We call it damage limitation. They're on a damage limitation course because now they can't deny who the true Israelites are. And he's going to make it quite clear to you. All right. The Lord said this, and this gospel of the kingdom, of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai's kingdom that's coming to earth, shall be preached in all of the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And that's what we're witnessing. We're witnessing this gospel, the word of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, the rising up of the remnant of the true children of Israel, the elect, the chosen, before the second coming of our Lord. The word is being preached in all, this gospel is preached in all of the world. Then shall the end come. So they know this is the end game for them. But this is now what we call damage limitation, what they are doing. So let's go on.
The only Jewish community. And then as the political and social environment began to change over the last few weeks, we decided to shift this a little bit. And
remember, the Ashkenazims are not the dominant community, Israelite or Jewish community, whatever you want to call it. The dominant community are those of us of color, those that descend from the transatlantic slave trade, the Israelites that descend from the Native American Indian tribes of North, South America, and Canada, today who they call Latinos, Hispanics, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans, the indigenous people of those lands. That is the dominant Israelite community, and that's also scattered and spread across the four corners of the world. The dominant Israelite community, right, is not the Ashkenazim, but that goes down to this social structure of this white supremacy. They believe they are, but yet they only make up, you think about this, the actual so-called Ashkenazims only make up 15 million in world total population. I bet between 15 and 18 million. That's all they make up. So they're not the dominant, but they still want you to believe that, you know, because they want to believe that we're the remnant of the remnant. We are the remnant, but he's going to confess with his own tongue who the true Israelites are.
Specifically at the core issue that seems to be affecting so many people in a negative way in recent weeks, and that's the issue of color. I am going to avoid the term race because I feel that it's not a helpful term. It has very little scientific merit. There's, remarkably little difference between the races other than what we perceive on an exterior level.
Well, there is a difference. It is all about ethnicity, whether you want to use the word race or not, because if your ethnicity does not go back to Jacob and to Jacob's 12 sons, who the Most High separated from amongst the nations, then the Lord said, Deuteronomy, when he said this, right? If you do not go back to the Lord's chosen people, I believe it's Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32, I want. Yes. When the Most High, Yahweh, divided to the nations their inheritance, it is all about ethnicity, whether you want to call it race, the actual term would be ethnicity. When he separated the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, because we are one of the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion, the Lord's people, of his people is Jacob, is the lot of his inheritance. So it is all about ethnicity. Absolutely. He said it's not about race. It is, because race is just really ethnicity. And it is, because you have to go back to Jacob's 12 sons. The chosen line is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't ever forget that. You have to go back to one of the 12 sons of Jacob, right, on your father's side. Not on your mother's side, on your father's side, because it is a patriarchic, this is a patriotic family, the children of Israel, all based on who your father is, not your mother. Always remember that. It's not a matriarchal system based on your mother. It's a patriarchal system based on your father. Has to go back to one of the 12 sons of Jacob. So it is about ethnicity or race. Call it what you want. But listen on.
But we do perceive differences in skin color, and unfortunately, we translate that often into some negative attitudes that are quite harmful. And I'd like to look at the issue of Jews of color, the history, the long and really important history of multiple communities of Jews of color. Today, we're going to start with the dominant society, actually, and we're going to look at the fact that Ashkenazic Jews have a color.
So he says again, the dominant society. We're going to start with the Ashkenazim. The Ashkenazi Jews are not the dominant society, right? They are not the biblical Jews. They are converts. Always remember that. The Ashkenazims are converts. Now, are these people actually Ashkenaz? No, because as we all know, Ashkenaz goes back to, all right? We're just working in the spirit today when it comes to these scriptures. Genesis chapter 10. Always remember this. Ashkenaz, if everyone comes to confront you, Ashkenaz is a son of Gomer. See, it says there, the sons of Japhet are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Teraz. And the sons of Gomer is who? Ashkenaz. And Aripta and Togarmah. So Ashkenaz is the son of Gomer. Gomer is the son of Japhet. So this is Japhet's grandson. And we know these people are not Japhites. They are Edomites. They are Shemites. They come from the line of Esau. But they still want to claim to call themselves Ashkenaz. They can call themselves what they want. But we know they are not Ashkenaz. And we know they are not Israelites. They are Edomites. But like I said, they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. Listen on.
And it happens to be in our society a fairly valuable color. It's white eligible, at least it has been since about the 1940s, and hopefully we'll explore exactly what that means over the course of this lecture. But it is by no means the only color, and it is probably not the original color. As one of my colleagues at the university, a very inspirational Jew of color that I interviewed to get some sense of, like, you know, what is your experience like? How should I go into this talk? She said to me, you're going to have a very hard time explaining to Ashkenazim that Jews weren't necessarily always Ashkenazic. They weren't always necessarily white. And that's the material that we're going to look at.
There you go. So he's said it right there to you. Jews were not always Ashkenaz, and they were not always white. They were people of color. All right? He's made it quite clear to you. He knows the original biblical Jews that we keep banging on about day and night were melanated people. Dark brown to a light skin, what we would call red skin, fair skin brown. People of color. They were not Caucasians. They were not different shades of red. They were not pink, which is a shade of red. Look at this man's skin. It is pinkish red. It's a shade of red. They're not white. He's not white like his shirt he's got on. That's just a social construct to put them, so-called white people, at the top of the ladder and to put people of color at the bottom of the ladder. All right? Always remember that. They are not so-called white. They are different shades of red. Just like how the Bible tells you about Jacob and Esau. All right? Oops. About Jacob and Esau. I think it's Genesis 25. Tells you Jacob and Esau, And it tells you when Esau was born. One. Two nations are in that womb here. And the first came out red all over, like, not as a hairy garment, but like a hairy garment, because the Israelites used to paint goat's head red and put them on the top of their tents, right? Keep the heat in. And they called his name Esau, which means Ayasha in the Hebrew, means wasted away, because he had no melanin in his skin. That's why he was called Esau. That's why he was described what he looked like. Different shades of red. So when we look at our professor here, you can see he's a shade of red. All right? Pink is a shade of red.
A hard time explaining to Ashkenazim that Jews weren't necessarily always Ashkenazic, that they weren't always necessarily white. And that's the material that we're going to look at today. And then the plan is that we are going to obviously touch on the issue of Jews of color in contrast to Ashkenazim today. But next week, we're going to focus on the Jews of Africa in particular. And the week after that, in our final lecture, we're going to look at the Jews of Asia. All fascinating, very old communities with remarkable histories. And I hope that you'll enjoy it. So why don't we start with the first question, why is this even relevant? And I'd like to point you to a passage in the remarkable itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela. This is a 12th century traveler who, as you can see from this map here, started out in northern Spain, the city of Tudela, made his way over the top of the Mediterranean, through Provence, and then down through Italy, all the way through the major cities.
And he was probably a Sephardic Jew, Benjamin Tudela. All right. And we've always made it common knowledge to you that, some of those Sephardic Jews in Israel are Israelites. The darker skinned, brown toned complexions that live in Israel today that call themselves Sephardic Jews that come from Spain and Portugal. We've always told you that, you'll probably get a large portion of that community that are actually truly Israelites. So Benjamin Tudela was a Sephardic Jew, which tells me he probably was an actual Israelite that was touring these different Israelite communities all around the Middle East. All right, so listen carefully to what he says about Benjamin Tudela and where he goes.
The Eastern Mediterranean, spent a lot of time in Israel, and we're not exactly sure of his itinerary, but he may even have rounded the entire Arabian Peninsula. And everywhere he went, he recorded details of what he saw. Specifically, he's interested in the Jewish community. So he talks about how big the Jewish community is in these places. He talks about, the famous personalities who lived there. He describes some fascinating people in Provence, for example, and great translators, Ibn Tibbon. And when he goes further east, he talks about the false Messiah, David Alroy, and some amazing stories that for a long time he was the only source. But he also says a lot about local trade and ethnography. And in fact, in many places, he is the only source we have for all kinds of information worldwide. He was a remarkable traveler. It's the kind of journey that really only a Jew could take at this time, because he was able to travel in the post-Crusade era through Christian and Muslim lands relatively unmolested. And it is an absolutely remarkable document. It was valued as soon as it came out, and it was translated into multiple European languages. Unfortunately, the earliest versions of the manuscripts we have are somewhat corrupted. They were probably edited by various handlers for things that were important to them at that time. But nevertheless, it remains an absolutely remarkable source. Now, in the context of his travels, he has something to say about the Malabar coast of India. That's on the lower west side of India. And it is probably someplace he never visited. He speaks about a lot of places that he didn't visit, places that he heard about from other people when he came to neighboring areas. So it does not appear that he actually saw this himself, but nevertheless, this is what he reports. I'll read in Hebrew and then I'll translate. So speaking about that region, he says, In those areas, there are about 100 Jews living there. And everybody who lives there is black. Shechorim is the word he used.
You hear that? So Benjamin Tuela went to India, East India, which is Elam. Remember, India is Elam, like Iran, Elam. And he came across a community that was filled of dark skin. These were dark skinned black Jews in India. All right. Now, remember in India, and I did a video about this already, you've got a community of people in India that are called the Dalits, D-A-L-I-T. And the word Dalit derives from a Sanskrit word meaning ground or suppressed or crushed. And they are considered the lowest people of all the castes, because in India they have a caste system based on your names, right? They have 5 different castes in India. They've got the Kshatriyas, the Vishas, the Shudras, and the Adivasis, right? And the Dalits, I believe. Now the Dalits are, like I said, their name means ground, suppressed, or crushed, right? Considered the lowest people of all the castes, right? Dalits are typically associated with the occupations regarded to, like, they look at them as ritually being impure, right? So they're mainly involved in waste or carcass. They have the lowest types of jobs. They're the lowest type of people in India, right? They are also regarded as and referred to as what? As the untouchables. That's what they're known as, the untouchables, all right? Now, we know that the Bible tells us that the Lord says that everywhere we go, we're going to be oppressed and crushed. Everywhere, let me pull it up. The Lord said that we're going to be oppressed. And I did a video about the Dalits in India, and I said to you that I totally believe that they are Israelites that are living in India, right? Are the Dalits, all right? Oppressed. Is it oppressed always? Losing. I think it's Deuteronomy I want to go to. Oppressed and crushed always. Hold on. Let me just do this. I believe it's go away. I think it's Deuteronomy. Yeah, there you go. Deuteronomy 28:29. It says, "And thou shalt grope at noonday, and as the blind gropest in the darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee." All right. Now the Dalit's name means oppressed. All right. If we go to, let me just put this up here. Hold on a minute. Indian caste system. Trying to get the best one to go to. What are the 5 caste systems in India? Okay. Let's see if this one gets to me here. This might break it down here. Yeah. Caste system in India. I just want them to go to it. Dalits. So you can see the no. But these are them here. These are the caste systems in India, right? The lowest caste system in India. All right. There it goes. Dalit from the Sanskrit, meaning broken. See that? Scattered. Also previously known as untouchable, is a name for the people belonging to the lowest stratum of the caste in India. And I truly believe those are Israelites that are in India today, are the Dalits that are still there in India, right? So their name means broken, scattered, crushed, oppressed. That's what the word Dalit means. And remember what the Bible says, right? Isaiah 11. Elam, India is Elam. The scripture says here, right? And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. And Elam is what we know today as modern day India. All right, let's see if it should show us in here. Is what we know today as modern day and Iran. Parts of Iran is known as Elam. I want to see if it shows me here. Right, it's include the whole of Persia, the Elamites, the news of a country. Isaiah. Because Elam, the Elamites, is Persia, which goes on to India. It's what we know as India today, Elam, the Elamites, all right? So let's just go back to the video. So when he said that this Israelite that came to East India saw these Jews, black Jews, those are the Jews that are in Elam. Those are the Dalits that are still there today.
In those areas, there are about 100 Jews living there. And everybody who lives there is black. Shechorim is the word he used.
Yeah, Shakor, which is the Bible Shakar. Everyone that lives there is black. All right? That's the Hebrew word for black, Shakar. All right? That's Solomon says that I'm black uncommonly. That's the Hebrew word. If everyone lives there, that's black. Listen on.
Okay. And the Jews too. The Hein Yehudim Tovim Bali Mitzvos Ubeneim Toras Moshe Uneviim, and they're very good Jews, and they perform commandments, and they have the Torah of Moses and the prophets, the Davar Muat Mitalmud v'Halacha, and they also have something of the Talmud and of the Halacha. So here it is in English. Basically, he's talking about reported speech about a place he probably didn't visit.
He says that all the people of the land are black, as are the Jews. They are good Jews performing Mishkot, knowledge is in the Torah, the Moshe, the prophets, and Talmud. So those are the Dalits that are still in, that are broken and scattered, just like the Lord said, in India today. That's why their name means broken and scattered. What did the Lord say? The Lord said he's going to scatter the children of Israel. They're always going to be oppressed and crushed, and he's going to scatter them, all right, to the four corners. Elam. Back to Deuteronomy 28. Is it 28 and 29? It says, and thou shalt grope at noonday, and blind gropers in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall buy you. Now check this out, verse 33. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Slavery. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always. That's what their name means. Their name also means, it just doesn't mean broken and scattered. It also means oppressed and crushed. It was, hold on. 1 second, family. Hold on. Remember I read this. Respect. An article that I read right here, Prospect Magazine. How does the caste system work, right? I remember reading it in here. Hold on. Stay with me. Stay with me. We're going to be a little while on this one. Here you go. The Dalits. The word Dalit, derived from the Sanskrit, means ground, come out of the ground, right? Suppressed or crushed. Get out of here. Suppressed or crushed. The word Dalit, derived from the Sanskrit, means ground, suppressed, or crushed. What did the Lord say to Israel? The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed. So I've done a video about the Dalits, and I said this before. Those are Israelites that are in Elam today, are the Dalits, the lowest class considered people. They are people traditionally regarded as the untouchables. That's what they refer to them as, right? They considered the lowliest people of all the castes. The Dalits are typically associated with occupations regarded as ritually impure, such as those involving waste and carcasses. Those are our people in Elam today, are the Dalits. Those are the same people who this Israelite came across in 1200 AD.
But he heard that. Isn't that fascinating? Everybody there is black, meaning he's usually traveling in more heterogeneous zones, or maybe he's not traveling too heavily in African zones.
Because remember, Israelites go from a dark to a light red skin brown. Let's remember that, all right?
And he says, and you know what? The Jews are black there too. And the next thing he says is, like he says about every single community that he visits, what's the quality of their Torah study? How observant are they? And he just puts them in the same kind of categories as everyone else. Like their blackness just happens to be an incidental factor, much like if they were left-handed. Like if he were to say, just by the way, isn't it fascinating? This community is so unusual because most of them are left-handed. Wow. And now that I've told you that fun fact, I'm going to tell you all kinds of important things about them, like they are good Jews and so on and so forth. By the way, I happened to look it up. Left-handedness is not pronounced in the Jewish population any more than in general populations, although that may have not have been the case throughout much of the medieval period, because unlike many cultures, Judaism does not consider left-handedness to be a disability. So what I'm trying to say about this particular example is that Benjamin of Tudela, when he encountered the idea of black Jews, he just, he said, that's a fun fact, but it's not really that important. It's kind of an irrelevant.
It's not that important because it was normal. Jews were black. He was a shade of black as well. Like I said, I don't believe that was an Ashkenazi Jew that came from Spain or Portugal, because the Jews that were in Spain and Portugal, we called them today Sephardic Jews. All right, those were people of color. Those were so-called black people, Negroes. All right. So I believe that Ben Tudela was a Sephardic Jew, person of color, that came across Jews in India that were even darker than him. And it was normal for him because that's what they were.
Fact, like if I said everybody had red hair, and then I went on to what is actually important. And in a nutshell, I'd like to do that with tonight's lecture, to look at what are the sort of unusual fun facts, as it were, and then focus on what's really important. And unfortunately, we live in a time right now, like today, where these issues are of exaggerated importance and often in a very deleterious manner. Many of us have been concerned by the apparent rise of the Hebrew Israelite movement, which is...
See, this is why he's had to do this. This is why I said, this is what they are doing now is damage control. They've got no choice now but to admit that the Jews of the Bible were people of color. And you're going to see him go into it. They've got no choice. It's being forced upon them now to explain to the world that the Hebrew Israelites, the Jews of the Bible, were a nation of a people of color, and they still are a people of a color today. But what he's going to try to explain to you halfway through this is how the Ashkenazi Jews become eligible. How do you become a member of these group of people? That's what he's going to try to explain to you halfway through. But the first half of this video that we're going to show you, he's going to make it quite clear to you that the Jews of the Bible, what we have been banging on about, what our elders have been banging on about for decades, right, on the highways and hedges and the different streaming platforms, are a nation of people of color, melanated people, so-called black people from a dark skin to a light skin. They can no longer ignore the fact. So this is a process of damage limitation. But you know what damage limitation does? Just like what we read, they shall make their own tongues to fall upon themselves. They're not going to help him. He's going to say and show you things, and we're going to show you how he's going to make his own tongue to fall upon himself. But they've had no choice now, because this word is everywhere. It's gone global. They should have never come up against Kanye and Kyrie and from Hebrews to Negroes guy that made that movie, because they have caused this whole thing to go global. So you've got two factors working there. You've got those that are doing damage limitation, like this professor of history, PhD, and then you've got those that are working with the government to bring in so-called anti-Semitic laws against hate speech and all the rest of it and that. So they're working it at both angles. So this is the damage limitation guy, just so you understand. This is the PR guy. He's got to now explain to you, the Jews of the Bible are actually black, but this is how they became so-called white. But listen on. I love it.
A movement that has connections to Judaism, although at the same time also to Christianity. And normally...
The movement has no connection to Judaism or Christianity. We are the Hebrew Israelites. This movement is the awakening of the children of Israel. This is Ezekiel 37 in play. That's all it is. I'm not them. I'm talking them walking down the street. I'm talking about the Israelites that have been preaching this word, going all the way back to the 7, who started up the school in 1 West. Going all the way back to our elders and to their elders who brought this truth to us, going back to the late 60s. It's just now it's reached a mainstream global thing. So Ezekiel 37 started to happen from going all the way back to the early 60s. They called them the 7. But now it's gone so mainstream now. This is damage limitation. They've got no choice now. They have to confront it, and they have to admit it now. Who are the biblical Jews?
Would not present any kind of challenge to the Jewish community. They are not the first, and I certainly think they are not the last group of people who believe that they are of Jewish extraction. And there may, in fact, be some merit to that. That's going to be something we'll discuss in greater detail, God willing.
There's 100% merit to that. It's all Bible prophecy, and the secular history backs it up. The merit to who we are is Bible prophecy, and secular history matches it up. Simple as that.
But what's frightening about this is that there's an unusual militancy among some of those groups. For example, this is from a protest that occurred just last week here in New York State, actually in the holy city of Brooklyn. And these are some of the flyers that were distributed. And you can see that the argument that many Hebrew Israelite groups maintain, not all, I shouldn't say many, I should say some, they argue that they are in fact the quote-unquote real Jews, and the other people who call themselves Jews, which basically means Ashkenazic Jews, are in fact imposters.
Which they are. We all know that. Let's just quickly bring out the scripture. They are. You are the imposters. We know you're the imposters. You know you're the imposters. You're there doing damage limitation. You're having to now play your hand. But you are the imposters, because the Bible tells us what was going to happen to us. Follow thine enemies, make a tumult, and they that hate thee, the Edomites, lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against thine hidden ones. We were those hidden ones. Now we're out there in the open, marching on the streets, preaching on the highways and edges, putting up videos, live streams like we're doing right now. We're no longer hidden. The scripture says, thou shalt see thy teachers, that your teachers shall not be hid from you anymore. I think that's Isaiah 32. They have consulted against thine hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. This is what they did. Took away our identity, called us all these different names. Now the truth is out. We are not Jamaicans, African Americans. We're not Latinos, Hispanics, Native American Indians. We are the true children of Israel. We are the biblical Israelites. We are descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. We are Jacob's descendants on our father's side. We consider ourselves the elect, the chosen, those that will be delivered out of these end times, destruction that's coming upon the nations. For they have consulted together with one consent. They have confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, the so-called white man, the Amalekites, the so-called Jews. So we know what you guys did. We know who you are. We know who we are. Now you just got to admit now that we are the true biblical Jews. So there's no going back on this now, and they know this. So, it's not no hate. We're just speaking the truth.
More than that, there is a kind of like an evil motive behind these imposters who have striven to displace the true Jews.
And I just read that, right? That hidden motive, Psalms 83. They've assumed our identity. The tabernacles of Edom, the so-called white man, the so-called Jews, the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, the Moabites, Chinese, the Hagarenes. So we've told you. They said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more. It's prophecy, what you did. But now it's all out in the open.
There is just a lot of nonsense going on with that. I myself can tell you that I've been an Ashkenazi Jew all my life, and I've never had any attempt to displace anybody else from their Jewish identity. As far as I'm concerned, they're perfectly welcome to believe whatever they want. It doesn't really bother me. I hope they don't impinge on my beliefs about my identity.
We're not impinging. We're just telling you that you're not the biblical Jews. You're not the Israelites. You are converts. And I know, they know, the elites, their rabbis, just like this man knows, the PhD man, that they are converts. They're not the biblical Jews. They're not the biblical Israelites. So we're not impinging on anything. We're just telling you, you're not the people of the book. We are. Just like what you're going to explain.
And as you can see from this flyer, there's also, strange admixtures of Christian elements as well. Many of these Israelite movements, they prefer generally the term Israelite to Jew, borrow heavily from Christianity.
Because all Jew just means you're from the tribe of Judah, or referring to the southern kingdom. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Judea. That's all Jew means. We are the Israelites. There are 12 tribes, not 3 tribes. There are 12. We know that the Native American Indians of North, South America, and Canada, today who they call Latinos, Hispanics, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, we know that they are the 10 lost tribes. They are the Northern Kingdom. Those are the Israelites. There are 12 tribes. So yeah, we don't just refer to ourselves as Jew. We only sometimes use that in explanation. We call ourselves the Hebrew Israelites because that's who we are. The people of the book. We're the real McCoy.
Lean Christian in their beliefs as well. And they tend to draw from some of the nastier elements of Christianity, like this passage from Revelation 2.9, referring to the synagogue of Satan. By the way,
it says the nasty elements of Christianity. It's not Christianity. We are the Hebrew Israelites. The word Christians just means the anointed, the followers of Yahushua. We are the followers of Yahushua. All right? The scripture tells you, Revelation 2:9, it's a twofold meaning. This is what he was referring to. And it's a twofold meaning because it was originally talking about the actual, real, true Israelites back in the days of the disciples, just so you understand. But it also pertains to those today. So this is what he was, sorry, what was I going to? 9, 3, and 2, here, 2 and 9. So this is what he's referring to. This was actually talking about the actual real Israelite Jews, our ancestors back in the days of the apostles, the disciples. But a lot of these prophecies and scriptures are 2 and 3-fold. It's now talking about those Ashkenazis and those different sects of those Edomites that call themselves Jews, which are not. It's talking about them today. I know thy works and tribulations and poverty, but thou art rich. Why are we rich? Because we are the true children of Israel. We've got the knowledge. We found out who we truly are. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, the Ashkenazim, and the other different sects of these Edomites, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Why? Because they've done crafty counsel together. They said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation. But that's what he's referring to.
Unfortunately, I have to spend a fair amount of time every day over the past 2 weeks going through my YouTube feed on the comments to make sure that it's a little bit cleaner before my kids see it. And as soon as I see the synagogue of Satan, I'm very grateful to YouTube, because now I can ban people for life from my channel. And I think I have enough banned people in my list that they can have their own synagogue of Satan and they don't have to bother mine. I shouldn't say that. That sounds terrible. But let's go on. It's not a joke, because some of the more extreme, deranged people who associate with these movements have been associated also with terrible violence, including an awful shooting in Jersey City.
And that's what the devil always does, right? He always tries to tie you to one incident where someone might have watched one Hebrew Israelite video or stood out and listened to the camp for a few weeks, you know, and got some Hebrew Israelite videos on his in his cookies. So when they went to his history on his internet, on his laptop, they found him watching some Hebrew Israelite videos, and all of a sudden he's a fully signed up member of the Hebrew Israelites. He was out there teaching the word. He had repented and converted, because if he did truly consider himself a Hebrew Israelite and part of the hopeful elect, he wouldn't be committing any violence against anyone, because our warfare is what? Spiritual, not carnal. We don't profess anything carnal. We don't instigate, we don't advocate anything carnal. It's all spiritual. We're in a spiritual warfare waiting on our Lord and Savior, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, and the angels of the Lord to come and deliver us and to take down you Edomites and Amalek, the head tribe of the Edomites, and the other nations, and to set up the kingdom of heaven on earth. We don't advocate any violence. But this is what they always do. They always try to tie us to some abstract incident where someone's watched 2 videos and say, oh, he was a fully signed up member. But that's how the devil operates, and you must know that by now.
Violence in upstate New York as well. Beyond the violence, we should note that there are many Israelite congregations that have very good relationship with other Jewish movements, even if there's still disagreement about who is Jewish and who is not. And a lot of this wrangling over who gets to use the term Jew to describe themselves has caused chaos among the various Black Israelite movements as well. And I think this is probably the first time in my life that I've ever quoted a professional basketball player, LeBron James, but I have to say that I identify very much with what he says about this current controversy. If you are promoting or soliciting or saying harmful things to any community that harm people, then I don't respect it. I don't condone it. And I think it would be great if we all stepped back and listened to LeBron James's wisdom here, because the temperatures are rising far too high. Now, I usually specialize in history, and I've spent a lot of time in 2022, which is not an area that I get in trouble with the Historians Union if I talk about it too much. So let's go more into the actual historical data that we can bring to bear to this whole issue. So here's an important question. And it is certainly important, once again, if you judge by my YouTube comments box, because everybody seems to want to argue what color Jews were originally. Let's try and figure out that question. What does the historical data suggest? We have no clear-cut answer from biblical texts or archaeological texts, but we do have some scientific data, and we do...
See, that's a lie, but that's how the devil works. Even though he's going to show you some clear-cut data, he's saying we have no clear-cut data from the biblical text, right? Or from secular history, and we do. We have artifacts. We have all the artifacts from secular history that shows us what color the real Jews were, the Israelites. And we also have it in the Bible. The Bible tells us. The scriptures tell us Judah is black to the ground. We have clear-cut evidence in the Bible. Remember, I'm going to listen to what it's going to say, but we have clear-cut evidence, you know. We can go to many scriptures in the Bible to tell you what color the, where's Jeremiah? what color the Jews are, we've got clear-cut evidence. Jeremiah 14. Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are what? They are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. We have clear-cut evidence. Is it Jeremiah 8 as well? 8 and 16. What was it? For the hurt of the daughter of my people, I am hurt. I am black. Shakar. Astonishment has taken hold of me. We have clear-cut evidence. Lamentations. Lamentations 4. Lamentations 4 and 8. Their visage, which is their face, is blacker than a coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It is withered. It is become like a stick. We have clear-cut evidence on what color the Israelites are. But they just don't want to accept that. But he's going to have no choice but to show you this clear-cut evidence. All right? Lamentations 5. We have clear-cut evidence. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. During famine, your skin gets darker. Melanated people of color, skin gets darker during a famine. Our skin was black like an oven because of terrible famine. I mean, but this is when they throw out all of these bones, right? These meat and bones. You got to get rid of the. You got to get rid of the bones. Job 30 and 30. My skin is black, shakar, dark skin upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. We have ample proof. Songs of Solomon. I am black, shakar, dark skin, but commonly beautiful. O ye daughters of Jerusalem, talking to the whole children of Israel. That's a poetic name when you're referring to the whole 12 tribes of Israel. As the tents of Kedar. Kedar means dark colored. As the curtains of Solomon. That's why if we don't know the Bible, the scriptures, when they throw out these bones, you're not going to know how to take them out. When he says, oh, we don't have any biblical proof. But anyway, this is
some very suggestive data from both biblical texts and archaeological data.
Hear what he said? There's very suggestive data from the biblical text and archaeological data. We've just shown you concrete evidence of the scriptures that show you that the Israelites are a nation of people of color, melanated people. He said it was very suggestive text. But that's how the devil speaks. If you don't know where these scriptures are, they will keep throwing you these bones and you're not going to be able to take them out of the meat. They want to eat the whole thing. There's nothing suggestive about those scriptures I just showed you. Those are concrete scriptures talking about the skin, my skin, my skin, my skin, my visage, my face. I mean, it couldn't be any clearer. There's nothing suggestive about that, but that's how Satan works. And when I say Satan, I mean our adversary, the deceiver.
Let's start with biblical passages, for example. According to the book of Genesis, the roots of the Jewish people are in southern Iraq, very close to Kuwait. Abraham and his wife Sarah originate from the city of Ur, and that puts us down, right in the Persian Gulf region like that. Later on, several other family members who may already have come from Ur are married in from the region of Padan Aram, which would be in Syria.
And remember who built those cities in Ur, right? If we go to, I think it's Genesis chapter 10. Just remember, all right? He's going to try a fast one. When we go to here, it says, and Cush begat Nimrod. Who is Cush? Cush is the son of Ham. And the sons of Ham, Hamites are who? The so-called Africans, are Cush, which we know today as Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea, Mizoram, Egypt, Put, which we know today as Libya, and Canaan, the Canaanites, who were the original inhabitants of the land of Israel. All right, a lot of the Canaanites are now based in South Africa today. The sons of Cush are Seba, Halabah, Sabath, Ramah, Sabta, Ramah, Sheba, Dedan, and Cush begat Nimrod. So Nimrod is Ham's grandson, right? He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it was said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter, was before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom, Nimrod's kingdom, Ham's grandson, the Africans, was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calah, and the land of Shinar. And out of that land went forth Asher, that builded Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth and Calah. So these are the places that Nimrod, and this is where the city of is, right? Where he's going to show you, this is where Nimrod built his kingdom. Here, Asher, Baghdad, what we know as Babylon, which will be Babel, Nineveh, all right? Kish, Zippor, Avar is here. Is in the land of the Chaldeans. This is Cush, his kingdom. So these cities here were all built by Africans, Hamites, which were considered the darkest skin of Noah's three sons. Ham was the darkest out of Noah's three sons, Shem and Japheth. This is Noah's grandson, Nimrod. He built most of these cities around here, right? See Nineveh up there, Asher, Pandaram, where Abraham is going to go to. He built all of these cities. The original inhabitants of Israel, Jerusalem, Ammon, and Jordan were the Canaanites. Canaan is Ham's son. Africans, original inhabitants of here. Africans were the original inhabitants of here, built all of these cities around here. But listen to his trying to squeeze out what the Iraqis would look like. I had to show you that so you can understand. You're going to see where he's going to go.
Even if one does not want to take the biblical passages at face value, one has to recognize that when they were circulating in antiquity.
So we are taking the biblical passages at face value, that when they said my skin is black upon me, or I'm black uncommonly, they're talking about melanated, dark-skinned people or people of different shades of brown. All right? So-called black people. We're taking it as face value, what the Bible says in several scriptures. All right? And we also know in the secular world what these places were and who inhabited them first and what cities were built up there first. Now, the people that live in there today are way different from the original inhabitants in that place 5,000 years ago, just so you understand.
If they were way out of whack with people's sensibility, people would say, hey, wait a second, how can it say we come from Ur because we physically look so different than all those Ur people? And we don't have evidence of any of that objection. Secondly, if we assume, and it's not necessarily an assumption we have to make, but if we assume that the people who live there today basically look like the people who lived there in antiquity, then we should be able to get a sense of what did Abraham and Sarah actually look like. So this is what typical Iraqis look like today. And you can see that, they tend to have a little bit darker complexion. They tend to lean towards darker hair color, although the child on the right seems to have a little bit lighter hair color. I think they could easily pass for Hispanic in New York City. But
you see, the problem is, and we must all understand this, that's like saying Australians are Caucasians, right? When people talk about Australia, they think, oh, white people. We know Australians are Aborigines. Dark skinned people with straight hair. That's like saying, oh, New Zealanders are Caucasian white. When people think of a New Zealander today, they think of all white Caucasian people. Well, we know New Zealanders are the Maoris, brown skin, different shades of brown, like The Rock, right? He comes from that type of people, the Hawaiians and the Maoris, right? We could say the same about America. The majority of the people in America today are Caucasians, right? America wasn't a Caucasian country. It belonged to our ancestors, the 10 lost tribes of Israel, the Native American Indian tribes, right? Which were very dark skinned and different shades of brown, but became lighter over the centuries when these Europeans came and colonized it. People think, oh, South Africans are white until apartheid, until they realize that it is actually a black person's country, but it was ruled by white people and colonized by them for so many years. Mandela didn't become president until 1994, I believe, or 92. All right. Up until then, everyone that represented the South African government and the people and the country as a whole were white people. Whether it was their football, cricket, rugby, the government, business, it was all white people. So everybody assumed they were white people. So the same thing with Iraq. Iraq today, the majority of these Iraqis descend from, I had this up earlier, they descend from the Turks. Because you've got to remember, Iraq has been colonized many times. And the last colonization of Iraq was done just after the Middle Ages, right? From here, from the Mongol invasion. The Mongol come from what we know as China over here, all right? Can you see the Mongol invasion? I'll show you on the map there. The different times of, all right? So then you had the Turco-Mongol rule. Then the last two major colonization of Iraq was done by who? The Ottomans, the Turks. During the 14th and 15th centuries, the Black Sheep Turkmen ruled the area known as Iraq. In 1466, the White Sheep Turkmen defeated the Black Sheep Turk and took control. Later, the White Sheep were defeated by the Safavids dynasty, which was known as Iran's most significant ruling dynasty in Mesopotamia. Then in the 16th century, it was the present-day Iraq came under the control of who? The Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans ruled Iraq for just over 600 years. Or just under 600 years, right? It says throughout most, because it was two different periods, right? They ruled it for 100 years during that time, and then they were kicked out and then they came back again in 1533. It says throughout most of the period of Ottoman rule, 1533 to 1918, 400 years, the territory of present-day Iraq was a battle zone between the rival tribes. So the Ottoman ruled Iraq for 500 years. Before who? Before the British took down the Ottomans after the First World War. The British Mandate of Mesopotamia. Ottomans' rule over Iraq lasted until World War I, when the Ottomans sided with the Germans and the Central Powers. The Ottomans are Edomites. The Turks are Edomites. So when you see those people in Iraq today, they look like this because they were invaded by the Turks. They took over. The people came and took over their country. They colonized them. And over the centuries, they breed out the actual Arabs that lived in what they called Mesopotamia, which were dark-skinned, brown-skinned people of color. So when he tries to say to you, oh, if we assume these Iraqis are the same people that lived in Iraq 5,000 years ago, that's total BS. Because Iraq has been conquered several times. And the last major colonization was by the Ottomans, the Turks, which are Edomites. Before that, you had the Mongols, Chinese, right? The Mongol invasion. Before that, you had the Abbasid Caliphate. Before that, the Islamic conquests. Before that, the Sassanid Empire. Different times. But the longest period of their colonization was done under the Ottomans, which lasted roughly between 500 and 600 years. Come on, man. Look what's happened to America in the last 250 years. Look at Australia. The British didn't go to Australia until the early 18th century, about 250 years ago. You think it's a white country. But these are the things that they try to do to mislead you. Let me just close that tab up for now. Let's listen on.
Basically, they look Middle Eastern, as we would typically think of Middle Easterners. And if we look at Syrians, we have the same kind of, more or less, family of complexion, eye color, hair color.
Same thing with the Syrians, same thing with the Iraqis. These were people of color, darker than what you see them in there today, that lived in Syria, that lived in Iraq, that lived in Mesopotamia. All right, because the word Arab means mixed. So these people became mixed after all of these colonizations that took place over the last 2,000 years. They became mixed as each time. But during biblical times, these were people that lived there were Hamites. They were Ham's grandson, Nimrod, that built all the cities, the kingdom of Babylon. Babylon is where? Babylon is modern day Iraq. Look, just so you can see. I mean, if you don't know the scriptures, they'll pull the wool over your eye. Babel is what we know today as modern day Iraq. Babel, Babylon. Babel, Babylon, the ancient city site of Babylonia, modern Hilia, situated on the Euphrates. That's Babylon, the Euphrates River, all right, which runs through Iraq and Syria. Babylon is what we know today. One of it shows you down here as well. Euphrates still, Babylonia, kings of Persia, a very ancient and celebrated city of Asia, metropolis. These are all the places that Nimrod said. These were Africans. So during the time that he's talking about, it's Nimrod. Nimrod built all of these cities. These are Nimrod cities that he built. Nimrod is an African, an Hamite. He built Babel, Erech, Akkad, Kala, Shinar, Asher, Nineveh. All those places that he was showing you on the map. So he's being disingenuous by trying to show you modern day Syrians and modern day Iraqis and saying, oh, these were the people of Iraq and Syria back then. No, they were dark-skinned Negroes. They were Africans. But that's how they be See, they need to make the Israelites as light brown as possible so they can get them to the so-called white skin that they are today. But that's them being disingenuous. So you got to understand what's going on here. The same time as giving you truths, the same time as being disingenuous by saying, oh, these are the people that were living in Iraq 5,000 years ago. No, no, no. They were Africans. And Abraham, with his father Terah, lived amongst the Hamites. Abraham was a Shemite. He lived amongst the Hamites that controlled those cities. Canaan was occupied by Hamites before the Israelites conquered the Canaanites and set up the kingdom of Israel, set up the promised land. They had to get rid of the Canaanites, which were Africans. But all of Mesopotamia was occupied by Hamites, literally.
This is probably based on a reasonable assumption that people back then sort of look like the people today who come from the same place, that this is probably what Abraham and Sarah look like. Now, there are other peoples living there, of course, and Israel in particular.
He said this is probably what Abraham and his son looked like. No, mate. Abraham and his son had curly, woolly hair and were dark-skinned brown people. They didn't look like these modern-day descendants from the Turks and the Mongols. No, my friend. That's why they call them Arabs, because they are mixed with all different nations. The word Arab means mixed. Disingenuous there. But listen on.
A crossroads between Africa and Asia and Europe. So there are lots of possible mixings. Let's get to that. But let's look also at some artwork that we have from history as well. Here is a really interesting tomb painting. Like a lot of the wealthier classes in Egypt would decorate their tombs with all kinds of amazing artwork. And because
so no matter how he tries to play this, these are all people of color. These are melanated people. Light shade brown, dark shade brown. These are the Israelites coming into Egypt. You've got the Egyptians in front of them. So that will be the Egyptians here to the right of his skull. These with the beards here would be Israelites. They're brown-skinned people. These are real artifacts that come out of the temples in Egypt. These are brown-skinned people. These are not Caucasian. These are not so-called white people, different shades of red. These are brown-skinned people. The Israelites were different shades of brown, from a dark brown to a light brown. Today we refer to that as red skin. But you see, you can't get away from the fact that the Israelites were a nation of people of color.
The way in which it was preserved in the dark, we still have them, and they can be reconstructed with some clearer colors, as you see in the bottom image here. This is from 1900, before the Common Era, which would be, although we don't have a really clear date of when Abraham.
So this is 1900 BC, probably around the time of Abraham's time. So he knows that. He knows Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. These were people of color. These were melanated people, different shades of brown. No matter how you try to shake up the coin, my friend. Right, there you go. Like I said, thou shalt make thy own tongue to fall upon themselves. He's got no choice but to admit that the Israelites are a people of color.
Would have made his way down to the land of Egypt, but it's definitely in this neighborhood. And here you see the Amu, who are Western Asiatics, led by a Hyksos figure, which some scholars even identify with Hebrews. And they are
because we believe the Hyksos, which means shepherd kings, were Israelites that ruled Egypt for a period of time. Because the word Hyksos means shepherd kings.
Into Egypt, led by some Egyptian figures. The Egyptian figures on the right, the two of them, you can see seem to be somewhat darker in skin tone, but the Hyksos and the Amu, Western Asiatics, which would come from the land of Canaan, the land of Israel today, they seem to look pretty similar to what we saw of the Syrians and the Iraqi today. Looking at another example a little bit later, and this...
Except those in the picture, let's quickly go back to that picture. Those in the picture have got all, can you see their woolly afros? They don't have straight hair. These are afros. These are Negroes. These are all Israelites coming into Egypt. These are the Egyptians to the right. These are Israelites, sometimes referred to as the Hyksos. Can you see they've got their afros? Their afros. These are brown-skinned people. These are not Caucasians, man. These are not, and he knows that. But he wants to make them seem like they are Arabic looking. He said they're similar complexions to the Arabs. Yeah, they were. Some were light-skinned brown. Some will be dark-skinned brown. But they all got their afros, their beautiful afros and their beards. They're not got straight hair, like what you were showing with those Arabs, those Iraqis and Assyrians, because those Iraqis and Assyrians, a lot of them descend from the Ottomans, from the Turks and the Mongolians, all right? The Asiatic people from the East, because of their colonization. We're talking about people that lived before. So they're going amongst the Egyptians here. So you can't escape that.
The Amu, Western Asiatics, which would come from the land of Canaan, the land of Israel today, they seem to look pretty similar to what we saw of the Syrians and the Iraqi today. Looking at another example a little bit later, and this would have been...
And remember, there's over 500,000, I did this before, there's over between 1.5 and 1.5 million, this is about 1.5 million so-called African Iraqis that live in Iraq today. 1.5 million. I think the population of Iraq is about 25 million. They said 1.5 million of them are of African Iraqi descendants, meaning they probably all go back to Nimrod, to the Hamites that are living in Iraq today. Those are the original Iraqis.
Or less in the time that Exodus is understood to be set. This is the tomb of Rechmire, 1450 before the Common Era, and this is a depiction of slaves in various stages of the brick-making process. And as you
who was making bricks in Egypt? The Israelites. Look at his hair. These are black people. Look at his lips and his mouth. Look at his hair. This is his curly hair. Look at his hair. Look at his hair. We were the ones that were making brick. Hold on. Let me just quickly bring this up here. Brick. We were the ones that was making bricks in Egypt. We were the slaves. And it says here, Exodus 1 and 4. Let's go to this one here. Exodus 5 and 14. And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, wherefore have ye not fulfilled your task in making bricks, both yesterday and today, as herefore? All right? It's telling you right here. Ye shall... It says, and Pharaoh commanded the same taskmasters of the people and officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick. What people are those? Those are the Israelites. As herefore, let them go and gather straw for themselves. Talking about the children of Israel. It says, where is it? So it says there, and the tale of the bricks which they did make hereof, ye shall lay upon them, ye shall not diminish them, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go sacrifice to our power. Let their more work be laid upon men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spake to the people, saying, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. What do they need straw for? They needed straw to make bricks. So when he jumps on it, it says, then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants? There is no straw given unto the servants, and they say to us, make brick. And behold, thy servants are beaten, but the fault is in thine own hand. So these were the Israelites making bricks. Do these look like so-called white people? Look at them. Look at them. Look at their hair. Look at their color. That's a light brown, darker brown. These are Israelites in captivity during the times of Moses, making bricks for Pharaoh. So he knows that. This is why he's showing you this.
More or less in the time that Exodus is understood to be set. This is the tomb of Rechmire.
See, in the time that Exodus, you see what he said? In the time that Exodus was meant to have taken place. What we're reading from Exodus. Israel's labor increased. This is during the time of Exodus. Verse 3, and they said, that God, the power of the Hebrews, the Israelites, has met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the desert and sacrifice unto Yahweh, our power, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with his sword. So this is the time of the Exodus. We're reading out the book of Exodus. So they know that. The devils know.
What we saw of the Syrians and the Iraqi today. Looking at another example a little bit later, and this would have been more or less in the time that Exodus is understood to be set. This is the tomb of Rechmire in 1450 before the Common Era, and this is a depiction of slaves in various stages.
I know those so-called European Jews, boy, when they see this video of their professor showing them that the true Israelites are people of color. I know they're pulling off those wigs. I know the women are pulling off their wigs and the men are pulling on them friggin' hair that they got. Trust me, this must be ripping the heart out of the Ashkenazim community to see one of their own show you that the biblical Israelites are a people of color. Negroes.
The brick making process. And as you can see, there's clearly two different complexion families represented here. It looks like African slaves and once again these Western Asiatics.
Did you hear the devil? He said they look like African slaves. They're not African slaves, they're Israelites and Western Asiatic. So he doesn't want to actually say those are the Israelites in bondage. He said they look like African slaves, Hamites and Asiatics, where we know the Bible only talks about the children of Israel being the main slaves of the pharaohs during this period before they were freed by the Most High via Moses. But that's what the devil does. He tells you what the picture's showing. Then he says, oh, but these are not the actual Israelites. These are Africans and these are Asiatic. Come on, man. That's such BS. But he knows.
These Hyksos or Canaanites, they're not specifically identified as Jews, but we
hear that they're not specifically identified as Jews, just like they're not specifically identified as Africans or Asiatics. But yet, the Bible, the history tells us the only people that was making bricks during this time for the pharaohs were the Israelites, not the Hamites, not the Asiatics, the Moabites, or the Ammonites, or any other nation of people, right? Not the Canaanites, but the Israelites. The Bible tells us that. History tells us that. But this is how they tap dance around the truth when they're showing you the truth. What a devil.
They're not specifically identified as Jews, but we get an impression of a mixed population coming together to build the storehouses of Pitom and Ramses. Those could very easily have been Jews, and they
now the devil said those could easily have been Jews, because he knows they are, because they were the only people that was building the storehouses, the brick houses, the cities, the pyramids, were the Israelites. So he knows that. So now he says it. Well, they could have easily have, after tap dancing around the truth, he tells you the truth. Listen again.
Mixed population coming together to build the storehouses of Pitom and Ramses. Those could very easily have been Jews, and they seem to look a little bit different than the apparent Nubians. The figure leaning at the right actually seems to have a blue eye. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, the devil trying to throw in that little blue eye, right? That's probably just some decorated thing. He knows those are the Jews. He knows the only history that talks about people making bricks, just like what we read back here in Exodus. The only history of people making bricks for the pharaohs were the Israelites. That's the only history. Read Exodus chapter 5. We're the only ones that it's got here. Ye shall no more give the people, the Israelites, the Hebrews, straw to make brick. As herefore, let them go and gather straws for themselves. And the tail of the bricks, which they did make herefore, ye shall lay upon them. So we were the only people where the Bible talks about that was in captivity, specifically making bricks. You see, these pictures were left for our heritage, for us to see these things, to know and feel the realism of the scriptures of who we are. These evidence that the Lord left in Pharaoh's temples was for the true children of Israel to see, because no other nation was spoken about making bricks and building cities for the Pharaohs but the Hebrews, which were the Israelites. But listen on.
That's just a degradation of the color, but they clearly have a somewhat lighter complexion, but they still don't quite look like Caucasians. And we'll get to how that comes up later.
Oh, he said, but they don't look like Caucasians. Wonder why? Because the Israelites are not Caucasian. But thank you, Professor Henry Abramson. Listen on.
Here we have finally a picture where we can say these are definitely Jews. You can tell.
Okay, so now he's saying he knows these are definitely Jews because this represents the captivity of the Israelites under the Assyrian king Shalmaneser V. I think if you go to, I think it's 2 Kings chapter 17, it talks about that. Shalmaneser, when the northern kingdom went to captivity and King Hoshea was the king. So these are Lakish reliefs. So he knows 100%, as all the archaeologists and the specialists know, right, that these are the real Jews of the Bible that are on these Lakish reliefs. Listen what he has to say. Then I'm going to show you some more close-ups.
All their luggage, they got wholesale. No, I shouldn't say those things. Comes up later. Here we have finally a picture where we can say these are definitely Jews. You can tell because all their luggage, they got wholesale. No, I shouldn't say those things. That's terrible. I can't help it. But this is unfortunately a sad image. This is a part of the Lachish reliefs that were commissioned by the Assyrian attacker of Israel, who displaced many of the Jews out of the land of Israel to Assyria. This is in the period of time which is associated with the 10 lost tribes. And you can see it's very poignant. There's a whole family here, including children, and mothers are riding on these wagons, holding their young infants in their arms. It's very touching in many ways. The Jewish figure on the left, it's impossible to assign a skin color with this kind of representation, but he is clearly bearded. In other parts of this particular relief, you can see that they tend to have like more curly hair, which is interesting.
Did you hear that? So he says it's hard for him to put the skin color on what skin color they are, but he says in the other reliefs that they've got shows that they have curly hair. Now, the only people that has curly woolly hair are so-called black people, Negroes, right? He knows that. So, but yet he said it's hard to put a skin color on them, but he knows by looking at the Lakish reliefs that they have curly. Listen to him again. Hold on. Then I'm going to show you.
In other parts of this particular relief, you can see that they tend to have like more curly hair, which is interesting, but it's still impossible to determine specifically what color they were. What I think we say with some, assurance is that the preponderance of the evidence suggests that they were not white like Caucasians were.
There you go. Praises to Jehovah, Hashem Yahushua, Hashem Rekakadash. He had no choice but to tell you that upon the evidence that we have seen and that we know exists, that they could never have been so-called Caucasian people. Let's hear this again from the devil's mouth. I don't want to call him the devil. Forgive me, take that back. From the professor's mouth. I don't want to be sounding rude here, all right? Because we're here to edify you with the truth. All right, so I take that back. I don't mean sometimes when I refer to him as a devil, I just mean he's deceiving you. All right, I'm not saying that he's got two horns coming out of his head, because the word devil just means to deceive. All right, we're going to go about this in a mild-mannered way, because this is all about the truth. So I want you to listen to the professor again. All right, Henry Abramson, right, PhD, professor of history, all right, Jewish history. Listen to him once more.
Assurance is that the preponderance of the evidence suggests that they were not white like Caucasians were. Assurance is that the preponderance of the evidence suggests that they were not white like Caucasians were. They weren't like, Scarlett Johansson kind of white. They looked a little bit more like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a famous Hispanic individual in popular culture. They look probably a little bit more like Middle Eastern people.
See that? Look, it's hard for him to say they look like niggers. He said they look more like Middle Eastern people, right? When they were actually Negroes, so-called black people, right? He was even trying to lean to Spanish, but he knows they're not white. He likes using Middle Eastern because they still got a bit of straight hair, and some of them are very fair-skinned. As I just said to you, there's over 1.5 million Afro-Africans that live in, African Iraqis that live in Iraq, right? You go to Yemen, literally all the Yemenis are so-called Negroes, all right, in the Middle East. You'll find a lot of them in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait as well. But it's hard for him to actually use the word Negro, because then he's have to say, well, they are those people that are in the Americas on the slave ships. So I want to quickly show you. This is what he was showing you here. It's the siege of Lachish, right? 701. Sennacherib, king of the universe, king of Assyria, sits on his throne, and spoils as Lachish are paraded before it in the British Museum.
Like Caucasians were. They weren't like, Scarlett Johansson kind of white. They looked a little bit more like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a famous Hispanic individual in popular culture. They look probably a little bit more like Middle Eastern people. In terms of biblical texts, there are a few kind of interesting passages that refer to possibly darker skin, in the sense that they were at some level understood to be other, but at the same time, they're also part of the community as well. Moses, for example, in Numbers 12, there's a whole discussion of the fact that he married a woman from Cush, Cush being the ancient term for Ethiopia. So on the one hand, the fact that she's identified differently, either by her place of geographic origin or possibly by her skin color, because Cushite could easily mean an Ethiopian colored woman as opposed to an Ethiopian origin woman. But at the same time, she's Moses's wife.
Well, we know the Cushites are so-called black people. The Cushites are African. They go back to Ham, all right? Cush is one of Ham's sons. Anyway.
You can't get much more into Jewish royalty than marrying Moses. So even though she is identified as somewhat other, she is also intrinsically the same. And you also have this passage in Song of Songs, which is a highly allegorical representation of the communication between...
Now listen carefully to what he says here, all right? We read this out earlier, Songs of Solomon, right? Chapter 1, verse 5, all right? Listen carefully what he says here, all right? I'm sorry for the interval there, because we broke off. I had to reboot the PC, the laptop. It just locked up completely, all right? So lucky for that. But listen carefully to what he says here, family.
God in the Jewish people. That's how it's understood in the rabbinic tradition. And this passage here, the figure representing the Jewish people says, Shechora ani v'na'ava, which is translated, I am black, but comely, or but beautiful. That vav of v'na'ava.
So you can't deny what it says there, right? I am black, which is shakar in the Hebrew, but comely. Shakar, black, dark skin, but comely, beautiful, right? Now listen carefully to what the professor says here.
And comely or but comely could be translated as an and or a but the context here implies that it is a but, meaning I am different, I am black, but nevertheless I am beautiful. And most importantly, this is a metaphor referring to the entire Jewish people. So it's hard to be...
Do you hear what he said? And we've always told you that. This is a metaphor referring to the whole Israelite Jewish community. Daughters of Jerusalem is a poetic way of referring to the children of Israel. So he's telling you that he's saying that I am black but comely, O you daughters of Jerusalem, talking about the whole 12 tribes of Israel, of a nation of so-called black people, and beautiful. Because he's talking about the daughters of Jerusalem, the 12 tribes. Listen again carefully what he says.
Context here implies that it is a but, meaning I am different, I am black, but nevertheless I am beautiful. And most importantly, this is a metaphor referring to the entire Jewish people. So it's hard to be any more inside than that, despite the difference in skin color. So that's to summarize what we know from the data about Jewish skin color, based on some common sense, some current ethnographic data, some biblical texts, and what limited archaeological evidence we have. So the next big question is, okay, how did Ashkenazim specifically become white eligible? And I want to...
How did you, so-called Eastern Europeans, become white eligible? Well, we know how. You converted, you're converts. But listen to what he says.
Emphasize here this point that, you could simply say become white, but that's not at all accurate, because whiteness is, as social scientists have demonstrated in so many ways, a social construct. And people are accepted or not accepted as white, which means essentially being, within
and we've always said that to you, right? Elder Malcolm always speaks about this social construct. White, to be called white is a social construct. To be called black is a social construct. Because within this social construct, the white people are at the top and the so-called black people are at the bottom. There is no such thing as so-called white people or so-called black people. We all belong to ethnicities. We all belong to nations. Our ethnicity, we are the Israelites. His ethnicity, he is an Edomite. He goes back to Amalek. They are the Edomites. We're ethnicities. The social constructs were created by the so-called white man, these Edomites, to keep you at the bottom and to keep you from your heritage by calling you black and labeling you as black. That's all you are, is black, black, black. And by calling themselves white. That way, no one needs to find out that they are the Edomites. Those are social constructs that were created by the so-called white man, which is referred to as white supremacy, to keep them on top. White Jesus, white Moses, white disciples, white apostles. You go to the 16th temple, they've got the Most High white with the Lord white, naked and in the temple. The angels are white, little white babies. All social constructs to keep them in the position of power and supremacy, when they truly know they are the Edomites, and we, who they've had in captivity, are the Israelites. So he's telling you that it's a social construct. There's no such thing.
Because whiteness is, as social scientists have demonstrated in so many ways, a social construct, and people are accepted or not accepted as white, which means essentially being, within the higher status of society, based on a whole host of factors, of which complexion is only one of them. And quite often there is kind of like a spectrum of skin colors that can still, as they say, pass. For Jews, whiteness was really not extended to them as people. When I say Jews, I mean Ashkenazic Jews here in America. really until the 1940s, in that brief honeymoon period after the Holocaust, which unfortunately seems to be waning now, where Jews were seen as part of the great triumvirate of American society, Protestant, Catholic, Jew, the idea of building a society that could include all of these different peoples together. Obviously, it did not extend to all peoples, but that's when sociologists say that Jews began to acquire much more whiteness. It also helped that there were lots of positive images of Jews that were emanating from the media out in the West Coast. Everything from, I think it's A.B. Loves Rosie, to various permutations of Jews being accepted in society and acting as comedians, things like that. So Jews were whitened primarily in the 1940s. Irish people also
they were whitened before that, but this is what they did. But I'm going to jump up here. So I just really want to get to the point here, right? He's going to start explaining to you where Jews come from, right? And I'm just going to probably go to about here, all right?
66 through 74, which resulted in the destruction of the temple and a massive number of Jewish slaves shipped off to Rome. Josephus, who was our primary source for this period, he often exaggerates numbers, but many historians think he's probably pretty accurate in this period.
So this is what he's talking about now. This is what they call the founder event. He's now going to declare to you where the Ashkenazi Jews come from, all right? He's going to say to you, this is where they come from, this particular line of people, all right? So I want you to listen, then we're going to quickly show you something before we end this.
97,000 Jews being shipped off into slavery. And then 60 years later, you have another revolt, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And in 135, the land is once again denuded of people, particularly in Judea itself, and Jews are shipped off to Rome for the slave markets, or also in Asia Minor and other places. So you've got now a big population of Jews living in Rome. And by the way, there was a population of Jews living in Rome that predated the war. There's references to it in a lot of the rabbinic literature that goes back.
Those Jews that were living in Rome then, during the time of the diaspora, 70 AD, when the Romans took down Jerusalem, those were the real Jews. Those were the people of color. Those were the Israelites, right? Those were the melanated people, different shades of brown. Those were the ones that were, we had 1.5 million went to the west coast of Africa, and hundreds of thousands of us went up into southern Europe, basically. Those were the real Jews that were dispersed and taken into captivity in 70 AD, all right? As prophesied in the book of Daniel, the book of Matthews, all right? And that was going to be for the children of Israel, all right? Matthews 24, Daniel's chapter 12, I believe, all right?
Well into the 1st century before the Common Era, even some scattered references for the 2nd century before the Common Era, when Judah Maccabee first made a pact with the Romans. And we have corresponding evidence from Cicero and various other Roman authors. So now we've got a big population in Rome of Jews, and they become free after some time. And they're significantly mixing, just like they were in Israel, with South Italians, and then later with North Italians. And then you have the founder event. And this is something which we
weren't mixing freely, because you've got to remember, we were taken down by the Romans. We went into captivity under the Romans as slaves. So when we was in Italy, we weren't moving freely. We were their slaves and their servants in Italy, the real Jews, after 70 AD. That's what 70 AD was about, the destruction of the temple, the second temple. The Israelites were dispersed. They burnt down the temple. They took all the valuables out of there, the gold, the silver, the bronze, everything out of the temple. They killed hundreds of thousands of us. Over 1 million of us went into the interiors of Africa. Hundreds of thousands went throughout Europe, were taken into captivity by the Romans. So we were not moving freely in Roman territory, in Rome, in Italy, like what he's saying there, right? Because we were just taken down by the Romans, so we became their slaves. Slaves don't move around freely. If you're a slave, you're under orders. You can got to be in at a certain time out. You got certain work to do. You're not moving freely, all right? Just so you understand.
Have described in Jewish literary sources. So this is not like a new surprise to us at all. Sometime around the year 800, a small group of Jews left northern Italy. We even know the names of some of them, the Colonimus family, for example. They left.
Keep that name in mind, right? The Colonimus family, all right? He said some small set of Jews left from northern Italy to go into Germany. He says the name of that family was the Colonimus family, Kalonymus. All right, and we're going to read about them, but listen to what Esther says first about this family, right? Listen carefully.
Their homes in northern Italy, and they made their way up to the Rhineland in contemporary.
Now, the Rhineland is Germany.
The Colonimus family.
All right, listen carefully.
Left northern Italy. We even know the names of some of them. The Colonimus family, for example. They left their homes.
Sorry, they left northern Italy, the Colonimus family. He said the Colonimus family, which were Jews, left northern Italy and went up into the Rhineland. The Rhineland is what we know today as modern-day Germany. All right? Listen carefully.
Northern Italy, and they made their way up to the Rhineland in contemporary Germany, those people form the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry. This is attested not only in the literary record.
So he said those people, that family, formed the nucleus of the Ashkenazi Jews, the Colonimus family that went from northern Italy into Germany. All right, listen up.
Of the origins of Ashkenazim, but we also have some interesting DNA evidence that predates this particular study from Erfurt that even shows that roughly half of Levites who come from Ashkenaz are descended from just 4 women, 4 presumably Italian women who marry Jewish men, and Judaism is matrilineal.
Do you hear how contradictory that was? So he says a high proportion of the Levites descend from 4 women, Italian women who married Jewish men. Now remember, these so-called Jews don't believe in patriarchal system. They believe in the matriarchal system, which means your mother has to be a Jew to be a Jew. That's what they believe in, these so-called Ashkenazi Jews. They don't believe that your father has to be a Jew. But he's just said to you, contradicting everything that they believe, that these 4 women are the progenitors of half of the Levites tribe that live all throughout Europe. Listen to what he says. Listen again.
Roughly half of Levites who come from Ashkenaz are descended from just 4 women, 4 presumably Italian women who marry Jewish men.
Did you hear that? So it says half of the Ashkenazi Jews that descend from the Levites descend from 4 Italian women that he believes married 4 Jewish men. But yet they believe that your mum's got to be a Jew for you to be a Jew. So how could they even be Jews in their eyes if they descended from 4 women? They shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. If they descended from 4 Italian women that were not Jews. He himself just said that. But yet their whole system they believe in is based on your mother being a Jew, not your father. But listen on.
And Judaism is matrilineal, so, and these are going to be,
he just said it. He said Judaism is matrilineal, so he just said it. But yet, half of the Ashkenazi so-called Jews descend from 4 Italian women that married Jewish men. But yet, Judaism is matrilineal. So he just said it. So how could they be possibly Jews in his eyes, right? So-called Jews, if they've descended from 4 Italian women that were not Jews? That's why I say you've got to be careful with these people, boy. You've got to listen to what they say carefully. Total contradiction. Total contradiction. But listen on.
Representatives of rabbinic culture, so we assume there was some conversion going on there. But anyways, let's go back to where we are here. The founder event happens in around 800 CE, and the remains that were studied in this particular paper come from Erfurt a good 500 years later. And by studying the DNA of these teeth, they're able to draw connections backwards that specifically prove this point that they all descend from a small group of northern Italians in particular. One thing that is not supported by the data, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but
So he says they come from, he says the other half of those Ashkenazi Jews come from that small family called the Ptolemaious family, all right? He said that's what the other half of the Ashkenazi Jews that came out of Italy, the small family that came out of Italy, the Ptolemaious family, the other half of the Ashkenazi Jews in Europe, Germany, and the Reinhardt, descend from that family there, all right? The Ptolemaious family. So we're just going to quickly show you a couple of things here before we shut this down. This is who he's talking about. So we're in the Jewish virtual library, all right? So we're going to look at, we're in their books, all right, to get this truth. It says there, the Ptolemaious, one of the most eminent Jewish families in Germany, which is what he was speaking about, that came out of Italy, which flourished from the 9th to the 13th century, especially in the cities near the Rhine. Among its members were numerous rabbis, preachers, poets, teachers, authors, moralists, and theologians. The most prominent communal leaders of this period came from its ranks. The origins of the family go back to 8th century Italy, which is what he was talking about. All right, they come from northern Italy, this Ptolemaious family that are responsible for the progenitor of half of the Ashkenazi Jews that we see today. He says they go back to 8th century Italy, although the name Ptolemaious appears in Talmudic literature. The father of Onkelos, the great translator of the Bible, was, according to Avodah right, in 11a, called Ptolemaious. So, although other sources refer to him with a different name, example, Kolonikos, right? While Ptolemaious is the name of many medieval Jewish families, it appears it doesn't always indicate a connection with the family described there. So, Ptolemaious, his father is Onkelos, right? Onkelos is the great translator of the Bible, according to the Avodah 11a, which we're going to look at, called Ptolemaious. He's called Ptolemaious, although other sources refer to him by a different name. The father of Onkelos, the great translator of the Bible, was, according to this book here, Avodah 11a, he was called Ptolemaious. All right? Although other sources refer to him with a different name as Kolonikos, all right? Same person, same name, but they're spelled differently. So, Onkelos' father is Ptolemaious. He said Ptolemaious is the family that came out of northern Italy, right? Northern Italy, North Italian, and went up into Germany, and he's a progenitor of half of the Ashkenazi Jews today. So we've got Ptolemaious there. Let's look. He said the father of Onkelos. So let's look at who this Onkelos was, right? According to this book here in the Talmud, Avodah 11a. So we've got this book up here, just to show you something, right? It says here, this is it here, Avodah 11a, what they were referring to. It says there, the Gemara mentions, right? The Gemara mentions, right? Other Romans were converted to Judaism, all right? Listen carefully. It relates, Onkelos bar Kolonias converted to what? To Judaism. The Roman emperor sent a troop of Roman soldiers after him to seize Onkelos and bring him to the emperor. Onkelos drew them towards him with verses that he cried and learned with them, and they converted. So Onkelos converted to Judaism. Who is Onkelos again? The father of Onkelos, the great translator of the Bible, according to the Abazar, was called Ptolemaious. His father was Ptolemaious. They are converts. So, according to what he just said, the progenitor of half of the Ashkenazi Jews that were in Germany and Eastern Europe today descend from Ptolemaious. Ptolemaious had a son called Onkelos. They converted to what? What did Onkelos convert to? Onkelos bar Kolonmaios converted to Judaism. They are converts. Let's go back and listen to what he said again. One more time.
Jews, and they become free after some time, and they're significantly mixing, just like they were in Israel, with South Italians, and then later with North Italians, and then you have the founder event. And this is something which we actually have described in Jewish literary sources, so this is not like a new surprise to us at all. Sometime around the year 800, a small group of Jews left northern Italy. We even know the names of some of them, the Colonimus family, for example.
Do you hear that? A small set of Jews left northern Italy. We even know the name of them. They are the Colonimus family. He's talking about these people here. He's the father of Onkelos. Onkelos did what? Onkelos bar Kolomaios converted to Judaism. They are converts. Him himself now is telling you, without even telling you. Listen again.
Year 800, a small group of Jews left northern Italy. We even know the names of some of them, the Colonimus family, for example. They left their homes in northern Italy, and they made their way up to the Rhineland in contemporary Germany. Those people form the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry.
They formed the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry, the Kolomaios. Well, the Kolomaios were converts, just like the other set of people, Eastern Europeans. The Khazarians are converts, just like the Kolomaios. So you've got the Kolomaios, they're converts. They formed half of modern-day Jewry, just like he just said, just like these Khazarians here. They formed probably the other half. Over 1,000 years ago, the far east of Europe was ruled by Jewish kings who presided over numerous tribes, including their own tribe, the Turkic Khazars. After their conversion, the Khazar people used Jewish personal names, spoken, wrote in Hebrew, were circumcised, had synagogues, rabbis, studied the Torah and the Talmud, and observed Hanukkah, Pesach, which is Passover, and the Sabbaths. The Khazars were an advanced civilization with one of the most tolerant societies in the medieval period. It hosted merchants from all over Asia and Europe. One of these pages, it is hoped that you would learn more about this fascinating culture. So the Khazarians were another set of Eastern Europeans that converted. So the Kolomaios are not the Khazarians. They're just another set of Edomites that come from the Kolomaios, which were converts. So the Khazarians, Eastern Europeans, they were converts as well, converted to Judaism, took on the culture, the language that says there. Khazar people used personal names, spoken, wrote in Hebrew, circumcised, and had synagogues and rabbis and studied in the Torah and the Talmud and observed the Hanukkah and the Pesach and the Sabbaths. Converts. So this is it, after their conversion, all right? These are the Khazars. So they're responsible for the conversion of millions of those Eastern Europeans that we see today, but so are also this family here, the Kolomaios, who he said is the progenitor of this founder event. That's what he said, right? This founder event.
Just like they were in Israel with South Italians, and then later with North Italians. And then you have the founder event. And this is something which we actually have described in Jewish literary sources. So this is not like a new surprise to us at all. Sometime around the year 800, a small group of Jews left northern Italy. We even know the names of some of them, the Colonimus family, for example. They left their homes in northern Italy, and they made their way up to the Rhineland in contemporary Germany. Those people form the nucleus of Ashkenazi Jewry.
Simple. The nucleus. So I don't need to say no more. I'm going to leave it there because we've gone 2 hours now, right? We had an interruption in the middle, but we've gone 2 hours. I pray you are edified by today's edification. And it was a long one today, but it was worth the wait. It was worth the session, the edifying, to understand what's going on, which is a response to how did Ashkenazim become white eligible, right? By this PhD Henry Abramson. As you can see, him himself told you where they came from. The founder event was the Kolomyas family. The Kolomyas family are converts, as we read in their own book, in their own Talmud, told you that they themselves converted to Judaism, which would tell you they can't be descended from any of the biblical Israelites. It's as simple as that. So I pray you were edified by today's edification. Sorry about the interruption that we had halfway through. Couldn't get around that. The laptop locked up. But as always, I want to give all the praises and the glory to Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai, Ba'asham, Rakah, Kadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who are leading this word in truth and spirit and sincerity. As I always say, Kal Halal, Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai. Yahweh is the Most High's name. Yahushai is the Son's name. Keep praying, keep safe, and hold on to this truth. As always, this is all we got. Their backs are against the wall. Are they throwing in the towel? Not yet, but as we can see, they are trying to damage the limitation process by finally coming clean and telling us that the true Hebrew Israelites were a nation of people of color. Undeniable. But they're trying to wiggle their way in by saying who their founders were. As you could see, their founder, Kolomyas, was a convert. And the other part of that make up that nation, who are the Khazars, converts as well. So, shalom, 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 family. All praises, all praises, all praises, all praises.